Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for coming on to be part of a great and important conversation for the youth. We look forward to a meaningful time together. My name is Steph Mushai from HIVOS. I'm the East Africa lead for our Global Open Contracting Program. I'm also wearing the hat of steering committee member for the Open Government Partnership. So it's great to be part of this collaboration for open government. Organized by the Accountability Lab and partners. I invite you to download Interprefy if you haven't already, where we will have French, Spanish, and English interpretation. That will enable, and you're also welcome, to ask your questions in the same languages. So today we have a short session, 45 minutes to get into this. So I'll ask our speakers to speak to their main points. And all participants to make their interventions to the point as well. We are looking at COVID-19 youth and open contracting. We will use the chat box to receive questions for our speakers. So anytime as we go along, please pop your questions there. And I'll keep track as the conversation goes along.
Steph, just from a tech perspective, if you wouldn't mind muting your interpretation, because we're getting a bit of sound feedback, so just that all of the participants can hear you, and then you're welcome to just go along at a regular pace.
All right, apologies for that. I hope that's better. Allow me to introduce our great speakers today. We have with us Gilbert Sendugwa, who is the Executive Director for the Africa Freedom of Information Center based in Kampala, Uganda. AFIC is a network and resource center that promotes our right to information and open contracting across Africa. Gilbert is well known in the region for his years of leading campaigns and in his areas of expertise in the region. So Gilbert, thank you for joining us today, and we do look forward to your insights. Next, we have Lorena, who is an economist and our resident expert on public finance management. She is with the Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency. She has great work experience with both government and civil society, and she recently led the development of the Fiscal Data for Emergency Response Guide for COVID-19. So we're in for some great insights from Lorena as well. Last but certainly not least, we have Andy Ocon, who is the Community and Capacity Building Manager for the Open Contracting Partnership. She has a great background on using data for various things to build digital democracy, storytelling, and holding governments accountable. She's a fellow from the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program 2016. And when Andy is not working this hard, she does love to sing. So we may just get a ballad out of her to close the session. Thank you, Andy, in advance. And welcome to the session. We look forward to your insights as well. Allow me to just quickly set the stage now as to why we're talking about public procurement and the youth and why this is important. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir when I say that youth are such a crucial group in this generation, and that's for multiple reasons, of course. So much is going into youth mentorship, empowerment, and opportunities at this time. Now, in many countries, public procurement is actually the largest market for business opportunities. And if it's not the largest market, it does involve sums of monies in the millions and trillions of dollars that young entrepreneurs have the opportunity to connect with. Many countries now have affirmative action, not majority, but a number do have affirmative action initiatives around their procurement markets and have laws preserving procurement contracts for the youth. Many of these opportunities, however, are only typically enjoyed by a small number of the youth, and these tend to be those that live in the urban areas and those, their rural counterparts, not having access or means to engage in this market. There are also a lot of instances of tokenism in these opportunities. There's fraud, there's corruption, there is unfortunately opaqueness in data that would otherwise support youth to be empowered through entrepreneurial opportunities. And now we find ourselves walking through a global pandemic that has hit global and domestic supply chains. It has also shed a spotlight for the need for effective, transparent, and responsive procurement for the delivery of public goods and services to the public. In this session, we could talk a lot about youth and procurement and empowerment opportunities, but in this session, we want to focus on 3 key questions that our speakers will just share their insights on and help us to answer. And we invite your questions as they go along, as they make comments. As I said, if you have a question, please pop it in the chat box and we will keep track. Let me begin by inviting Gilbert to help us consider our first question. Gilbert, please tell us, what are your quick thoughts about whether procurement is a viable means of empowering and creating jobs for young people? Welcome, Gilbert.
Thank you very much, Steph. Good evening and good afternoon, everyone. As you've put it, public procurement is a major instrument that can be used to transform societies and more so youth. Speaking about Africa, Africa has a very young population. 60% or more of the population in Africa is young. Which means behind this is innovation, is energy, and interest to take advantage of opportunities that might present themselves. This said, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused serious challenges, economic and social challenges, has pushed many young people, especially those in informal and formal jobs, out of job or employment and economic opportunities. And this has caused lots of challenges, especially in Africa, the group we call hand to mouth, those who live on their income that they earn that very day. But on the positive side, governments in Africa, the World Bank and other development partners have invested a lot, billions of dollars to respond to this crisis. And this has opened up opportunities for young people in Africa and I believe also in other parts of the world, particularly in areas like production and distribution of masks, hand sanitizers, and also in some economies in Africa, relief food distribution to be able to minimize harm, especially on those who have lost income, so that they don't have to die of starvation. Now, I'll highlight very quickly a case study of a young girl called Kathy. She had a startup called Sheen Plus Cosmetics before the pandemic. With the pandemic, her market was destroyed, but she went to a government institute called the Uganda Industrial Research Institute, was skilled, and she turned her business into responding to the COVID-19 pandemic through production and distribution of hand sanitizers. As a consequence, she has employed now 4 youth on full-time and 9 more on part-time across the chain of business. She won a contract to supply hand sanitizers to 3 government entities, including the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, Makerere University, and Chambogo University, among others, many private also enterprises. So her business, like many, is looking up as a consequence of this. But this is only one case. Behind, there are so many which are not able to pick up because of various challenges, which I would like to highlight. The first one is that disclosure for procurement opportunities is very weak. In Uganda, only 7% of required data is being published, which means that many young people are not able to access data and information on available procurement opportunities. That's a major area of concern. Secondly, skilling and training to participate effectively on emerging opportunities presented by the COVID-19 response is also needed. And many young people in Africa do not have this. A number of governments already had initiated affirmative action for youth and women, people with disabilities, even before the COVID-19 pandemic. But there is a challenge that, first of all, data is not being captured in a disaggregated manner to know which youth enterprises, what are they getting, what is the proportion of those who are in against those who are out. So this is a major challenge that is needed. Secondly, the policy is, most of these initiatives are not in policy. It's just public announcements, political announcements, but it would be good if this could be institutionalized through a policy framework. Now, the World Bank and IMF in particular have made it an obligation for recipient governments of their support for COVID-19 to publish procurement opportunities. This, to a large extent in Africa, speaking of Ghana, Uganda, and Malawi, for example, has remained on paper. When you go on government procurement portals, on websites, you don't see this information on available procurement opportunities being made possible under support from the World Bank and other areas. And then also...
One more minute, Gilbert. Sorry to rush you to wrap up.
Thank you very much. And this is my last, that public access to information and monitoring of what is taking place, the commitments, and how they are being implemented or otherwise is very, very critical. And all governments, development partners need to invest in facilitating this and more so asking questions that would allow citizens to provide feedback on how this is going. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gilbert, for that food for thought. Good to hear it's not all doom and gloom, where youth are converting businesses in response to COVID and even creating employment. It's good to highlight good things that are working, that 7 youth full-time, none part-time. We note weak disclosure for procurement opportunities and that we need data to help us understand the extent to which youth are benefiting. You talked about political tokenism with no institutionalization, and the gap in training and skills and access to information, and the implementation is critical. It would be great to hear from those on the call any stories that they may have on youth that have successfully converted businesses or are using information that is publicly available. Also, it would be good to hear, do you have challenges? Have you been somebody that is interested in the procurement market but have had challenges accessing information that allows you to get into the market, or somebody that you know? Please do pop your comments in the chat box. Let me now invite Lorena. Lorena, I invite you to just share briefly some helpful insights on how youth-led owned businesses have been affected by COVID-19. Welcome.
Thank you, Steph. Well, COVID-19, we were started with this double crisis, right? The health and economic, but then we have the climate crisis, and we have a perfect storm. It's a terrible crisis. And since the beginning of the pandemic, we see that more than 70% of the youth who study or combine study with work have been adversely affected. The closing of schools, universities, training centers, this is already affecting the possibility of business. This is a very interesting study by the International Labour Organization, this survey, and they find that the impact of the pandemic on young people is systematic, deep, and completely disproportionate. So it's much more deeper than with older generations. And this is particularly hard with young women, the younger and youth in lower income countries. So this has an important effect on inequality. And just a reminder, and this is hard. I was not sure if I should. I think I'm not categorized as youth anymore. But the youth and the future generations are the ones who will shoulder much of the long-term economic and social consequences of this crisis. So it's not only that they are being disproportionately affected right now, but they're the ones who are going to have to pay the debt incurred right now. So I am glad that we're discussing this because this will affect the well-being in the short term, and it has equity considerations in the long run. At the same time, small and medium enterprises and startups are often the hardest hit in times of crisis, like COVID. And this is even more marked for young entrepreneurs. So we have the youth factor and the small medium enterprise that is usually young generation has a small medium enterprise, not the big ones yet. Hopefully they'll reach that at some point. But it's usually SMEs. So they have this double impact and it puts them in this double vulnerability. Just a quick fact, as a result of this COVID-19 crisis, 35% of young entrepreneurs have had to lay off staff or reduce staff hours. 25% have had to cancel orders from suppliers. 25% have had to postpone investments, and 24% have had to reduce wages. So these businesses are harshly affected and disproportionately affected by this situation. And moreover, there's this survey, and they asked the young entrepreneurs how they are being affected and what is affecting them more. Whether it's the delay in the aggregate demand, there's no more demand. And 26% report that they are being affected by delays in progress of government business. So government, that is an important driver of the aggregate demand, that it's delaying processes, which makes sense because of the COVID-19 uncertainty and the effects on the budget, are also having an effect on this younger generation led businesses. And that has a lot to do with procurement. When they are delaying procurement processes, of course, they are affecting SMEs, and of course, they're affecting the youth, and everything stalls. So, so as you can see, the rulemaking function and the fiscal and budgetary measures are very powerful levers at the disposal of government to make sure that this is faced with equality and that the crisis does not have more of an intergenerational transfer effect, so that the youth is not more affected in the future. And government, of course, and Gilbert was already mentioning it, the plans and the strategies to recover from COVID-19, they're mobilizing a lot of resources and they're creating a long-lasting effect, but they are usually not considering the effect on the different generations. So I just have one example from the Welsh government, and they have adopted this framework that they will be evaluating the measures that they are taking for COVID-19 with the principles of intergenerational justice. So this is the only government that I have found that is actually taking this into account in their measures and will evaluate the measures they take, the benefits they're giving to companies or to individuals. in analyzing the effects on different generations. But most of the cases, they're not making any distinction for youth-led companies, and that can be a problem for young people trying to access benefits and support from government. Because most of them cannot access loans yet because they don't have the credit history yet, for example, or most of them are still informal. And that is also found in this survey made by YouthGov on Asian markets. And most of the youth-led companies are still informal. So they can't access these benefits from government. So even though the government is trying to make this happen there, if you don't look at the differentiated effects of young people, then you're leaving them outside, even if you don't want to. So I have some very final conclusions. So government budgets are a powerful driver of aggregate demand and also set policies to support national economies. So they can benefit or affect the impact of youth-led businesses, for example, through public contracting processes, but also through the stimulus plans. So how are these programs to benefit tax cuts designed? If we don't see a differentiated approach of fiscal, both budgetary and taxing benefits, we won't see the differentiated impact on the younger generation. Government relief measures should be taking into account this intergenerational effect. And finally, just because I can't leave this out, the importance to have transparency on the design of the measures. We need the data to be able to evaluate this effect of the measures. So thank you, Steph.
Thank you so much, Lorena, for those great insights. Just to know that the youth are being adversely and disproportionately affected, and that young women are actually the most hit. SMEs and startups being where most youth businesses lie, tending to be the hardest hit in COVID-19. Thank you for the insights on the government levers, such as budgets and tax cuts, and the opportunity for governments there to protect the youth and close the inequality gap. I like what you said about intergenerational justice, and it's unfortunate that there is a large amount of money being mobilized at this time, but it's not considering the youth. And that's one example, only one example where that's happening. And we hope that should happen some more, very much like the proposal in terms of transparency in the design. So thank you so much for those insights, Lorena. Anybody that has any questions or clarity or an example from something Lorena said, please do pop it in the chat box. And when we come to the time of interaction, we will get the comments from there. That will be our main place of interaction. So I welcome you to put your thoughts in the chat box or your comments and questions. Andy, if you would land this for us now, we're interested to hear how young people are finding ways to ensure a more fair and transparent contracting or procurement during COVID-19. Welcome, Andy.
All right, thank you very much, Stephanie. So in the line of our work, we've interacted with a number of young people, and we've seen that young people across the world have come up with some of the most innovative ways to ensure fairness and transparency during the pandemic. We've seen many youth-led groups and organizations tracking emergency procurement. In Paraguay, for example, there's a volunteer organization there called Reaccion that consists primarily of youths in their early 20s and younger. And they've been working on open contracting reforms with a special focus on contract monitoring for educational infrastructure. So they've been actively monitoring spending right now. So during COVID-19, they've shifted a bit from their primary focus to actively monitor COVID-19 spending, and have even taken legal action to get tax returns from public officials. And they have also led trainings for journalists on how to use emergency procurement data in investigative storytelling. Reaccion has also worked as promoters of the Control Ciudadano platform, which is an open data portal available to citizens in Paraguay that helps to guide citizens on how to control public resources. And what they've done there is that they've made available to the public data on purchases made during the COVID-19 pandemic, with the goal of having more data to help exercise citizens' rights of being controllers, citizen controllers. And seeing that young people are such a tech-driven demography, I believe that building the capacity of such young people is important for them to have an impact on how they can use open contracting data to tackle some of the challenges that have been brought on by the pandemic. In Colombia, for example, OCP, Open Contracting Partnership, where I work, was part of a datathon where we trained young people on using public procurement data to safeguard public resources during COVID-19, during the COVID-19 emergency. And one of the participants was an organization called Canopy, and they were also the winners of the hackathon we had during the datathon. And they proposed a very exciting project that was going to help facilitate citizen oversight on contracts that the government of Colombia had awarded for procurement emergencies. So their project basically helped detect early warnings, basically red flags of how COVID-19 contracts were being awarded across the procurement landscape in Colombia. And we've seen similar work from young people in Nepal and Ecuador as well. They've, and most of them are involved, we've seen, in analyzing emergency contract data. And I'd say that most of the youth projects that we've seen have worked deliberately to demystify procurement data, to make it readily available and accessible to citizens and easy for citizens to understand. And journalists too have benefited from some of these projects, as we've seen a lot of infographics and other data illustrations being used in different countries. One other example I would cite is DataLat, which is a civil organization in Ecuador that's run by some young professionals. They too have also focused on open data and transparency. And they participated in our action research project and helped analyze OCDS emergency contract publication in Ecuador. And another thing they too have done is that they've tried to involve young people in the subject of open contracting by organizing a lot of activities, not just trainings, that would make it more inclusive for young people. And the final example I want to cite is a case in Nigeria where PPDC, which is one of the procurement monitoring agencies in Nigeria, have focused on implementation and monitoring COVID-19 contracts. It's a young organization as well. And what they've done, given that Nigeria is a somewhat low-tech region, they basically trained some local monitors, some young people in their local governments to monitor the disbursement of COVID-19 palliatives in Nasarawa and Dala local governments in Kano State. And the reason behind their monitoring was to ensure transparency and accountability on all COVID-19 contracts. And they did make some great findings for us. These young people found that the state government relied so much on promises from the federal government and didn't do enough in their own capacity. So we've seen these different interventions from young people across the world. And I would like to end with the point, throwing something out to the audience, that while we've seen this intervention, that the youth have taken their own steps to intervene in COVID-19 emergency procurement monitoring, I think it would be, we could do more and better in creating an explicit design for youthful activists. And I would love to hear from the audience how we could go about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. And for that question posed, I see we're all a bit shy to get on the chat box. Please do pop some question or comment there so that we can manage the interaction better rather than having everyone put on their mics on at once. We'd really like to take advantage of the chat function so that we can moderate the questions and comments or suggestions a bit better. But thank you so much, Andy. It's great to hear that youth in Nigeria, in Ecuador, in Colombia, and in Nepal are doing great things to make open contracting data available, publicized, and usable, to be able to help improve citizen oversight on procurement and great work like early warnings for COVID-19 contracts. And great to hear that even journalists are using this information and others to monitor or to tell their stories. So that's really great. Thank you to all the speakers. So for all your food for thought, for the great examples in the background from all the different parts of the world. I think that has been really, really excellent. So allow me now to just open up a time of interaction. We have 15 minutes left for the session, and so we will get into an interactive time. I see a question from Blair that I will pose to the speakers, and any of you is welcome to unmute yourself and answer. The question is, what kind of skills do volunteers and others who hope to be monitors need to ensure open government and to monitor procurement and contracting during COVID-19? Do they need tech skills? Do they need investigative skills? What else could they need? That's open to any of our speakers who would like to take that up.
I think I can start with that since
Sure.
I directly referenced or spoke on that. I would say it's a mix. I would say the first thing that's needed is probably just an interest in knowing what your government is doing and how your government is helping the situation. And then basic tech skills, if you can use spreadsheets, if you know how to use Office tools, Google tools as well. Those are some basic tools that you might need. And investigative skills are also great if you want to maybe write articles on it. And these are things that we are able to train on, and some of the NGOs that I mentioned as well are able to train on. What I can do is I will share links to some of the work we've done and some of the NGOs that I mentioned, some of the organizations that I mentioned and what they're doing. And anyone that's interested in that can always reach out to us on what support we can provide.
Thank you so much, Andy. Please do provide a link maybe to OCP for those that have not maybe heard of OCP before today. And that's a great question. It's good to hear that skills, just like using a spreadsheet, can allow you to interact and you don't need to be overly specialized. I'm a great believer that spreadsheets save lives. So I will pose a question. If there are no questions in the chat, I did have a question as I heard the speakers go along, and then I will come to Blair's questions.
If I may,
he has a second question. I beg your pardon?
If I may, on this same one.
Sure, Lorena, sure.
From our side, from GIFT, we have seen many people that do not have knowledge of Excel or data, and that can get involved in monitoring. So what we see is whether it's monitoring, for example, of a construction of schools or hospitals. Right now, that is very important, that part of monitoring, and sending the feedback through the correct channels. So sometimes that is just about enabling the correct channels for this feedback to be closed. We see some great work going on with Budge IT in Nigeria on this and monitoring this process, or for example, in South Africa, that we have our partners that have this platform, Bulek Amali, made by government and civil society, where you can track the infrastructure projects. And that is, then you don't even have to be a tech expert. So it's just, do I want to monitor what's happening surrounding where I live? And then that's possible when you create the correct channels for this to happen.
Thank you so much, Lorena. I hope we take up that encouragement. You don't need to have specialized skills to monitor, and as part of our roles as citizens for this accountability for our public goods and services and how they're procured. That's a great encouragement. Gilbert, any input on that one, or can I pose the next question to the speakers?
Yes, thank you very much for the great question, Brea. We've done extensive contract monitoring, and we see that red flags happen at every stage, whether it is at procurement planning, tendering, award, or actually in the execution of contracts. Now, at each of these phases, you need different skill sets and probably also different players. For example, in pre-award process, that is from planning, tendering, and evaluation, you need someone who understands the contracting process, procedures, and the law. so that one confirms whether the law was followed or not, whether procedures were followed or not, or actually understand that there's collusion by looking at, for example, anticipated price in the procurement plan and eventual award price. If it is within 1% margin, it is an indicator that there is collusion. Now, after award, during execution, I think here you need local people, the local monitors, at least we have used that, because the red flags we find here are things like ghost projects, ghost contracts, shoddy work, and among others, and then using substandard materials, among other things. And here, when local people are informed of what is expected in the contract and are given a checklist, like we do, they have given us very good feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then also, finally, the reason for monitoring is to improve the performance of that individual contract, but also to inform decisions that would prevent similar occurrences from happening. So you need good skills and understanding on how to communicate what you find, to whom, and the desired impact that you need. So to that extent, therefore, you need, I think, different sets of skills and probably different actors in the procurement monitoring cycle.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gilbert. Different actors, different skills, which means there's a place for most, if not all of us, in the various skill set and actors. Final question to the panel, or I see one from Katie. Maybe Accountability Lab will allow me to take the question from Katie, which is the final one as we're running to the close of this session. Katie asks, some people who benefit from a corrupt system say that corrupt governments and contracting systems is good for business, and so they do not want to fight the system. How do we make arguments that corruption is actually bad for business and that we need a more transparent system? Great question, Katie. Who would like to kick us off in response? If you could keep your response as concise as possible. We only have a few minutes to the end of the session. Lorena, I see you're unmuted, so I'll give you first go.
Actually, fortunately, I think we have enough studies by now researching the impact of corruption in many aspects of the economy. For example, in the availability of competency and a good market. So this is actually something that has been measured. There is a lot of research behind this, real data. For governments, for example, the access to better credit ratings, it is linked with combating corruption. So that is all benefits of combating corruption and having a better market. So having a better market will give better prices and therefore will create better conditions for the economy. So I would really encourage you to look at research that has good analytical correlations on this, and we have a couple of them. I will share a link right now on this linking fiscal transparency and corruption with better credit ratings, for example.
Thank you so much, Lorena. Just 1 minute maybe for Gilbert and Andy to just respond to that, and then we will close out. A thank you from Katie. Go ahead, Gilbert.
Thank you very much. So corruption is not good for business because everyone is paying. If everyone is paying, then no business will be sustained. In our monitoring, we look at different indicators like competition, corrosion, inflated cost and efficiency, among others. Now, what we find is that any of these, perpetuates corruption and ends up eating the business which was paying bribes. So the best way is to say that a good, clean environment is good for business, It encourages business to invest because they know that only their capacity and quality of their tenders will assure them of jobs. If it is not like that, you have a situation here in a number of African countries where we work, that because for a long time, business decisions were being made under the table, companies did not develop capacities. Now governments are crying that they don't have firms which can do jobs, especially infrastructure project jobs. Because for a long time, companies were investing in relationships rather than capacities. And it has hurt them, it has hurt governments, it has hurt the citizens, it has hurt the businesses as well.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. Very true. As I give Andy an opportunity to have a last word, I just want to encourage us to go to the chat box and see all the great links that have been posted before you get off the call. You may need to just quickly copy paste them to be able to have a look through them later. Andy, welcome.
All right, thank you, Steph. So a lot of what Gilbert mentioned resonates with me in the sense that even the question says it's some people benefit. So it clearly shows that there's already a number of people that do not benefit from the system. And it's such a small number of people. And what we found with open data, open procurement, is that it allows for competition. It allows that more people can participate, actively participate, because you're able to identify open beneficial ownership to see who benefits from government contracts. And this is what people don't want. And also, in many parts of the world, we see that many people have leverage on their relationships rather than the value that they are adding to businesses. And it's the government that is losing out. That is why there's so much dissatisfaction with citizenry, because government has not been able to complete a number of projects that will be beneficial to the citizens simply because they want to oil certain people's pockets. They want to satisfy certain people. So in making the argument, I would say that transparency allows for us to expose those people who say are recurrent recipients of government contracts, showing that there isn't fair play in government contracting, and also making a case for it would be that even for the government, there's value for money in making your data open, in making your procurement processes more transparent, so that you don't feel indebted to anyone in particular, and you can run efficiently, and you can see wins for your citizenry, and even for the work that you do, the service that you render to citizens can be very evident in the work that you do.
Thank you so much. There are wins for government being transparent instead of corrupt. I hope this has been useful. Great question. Corruption is something across the board. I would very much like to thank Lorena, Gilbert, and Andy. Thank you for your great insights. I think we can see that you're great folks in your field, and we're really glad that you could take time with us today. And I'm sure the participants have really benefited. So great session, everybody. Thanks to Blair and his team at Accountability Lab for putting this together. Our contact information, if you need to get in touch with any of us for further information or any query, is up on the screen now. So please do get in touch for any further information. We have up now other activities. You can access these at the participant map. The link is up there now. You can fill out also the participant matching form by going to that link, where there is a program to help you develop your skills and teach others. So if you have a skill that you want to teach others or you want to learn, please go to that link so that Accountability Lab can match you. We have, to finish off, a social media challenge. Please answer this question using the hashtag Digital Youth Summit, OpenGov, and Youth Power. What innovations or stimulus plans do you think your country should consider in order to support the youth during the pandemic? What innovations or stimulus plans do you think your country should consider in order to support the youth during the pandemic? Please get on your social media, share a short video on your thoughts. make a great video, tag Digital Youth Summit, OpenGov Youth Power, and let's have a great conversation and get the information and conversation outside of this group. Thank you so much again. Have a good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, good night, wherever you are, and see you at the rest of the summit. Thank you, everybody, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you all, and bye.
Bye-bye.